So today I thought we'd talk about the PART Act, which stands for Preventing Auto Recycling Theft. Now, to put this in a time frame, we're late April of 2024. This is a federal bill. This bill was introduced to the Senate in January of 2023. The bill number is actually S-154. So anybody watching the video, they can go to congress.gov. They can look it up themselves. But this bill applies to everybody that is buyers and processors, recyclers of the catalytic converters. And I have some bullet points here. This bill directs the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, to require converters be inscribed with VIN numbers, creates a grant program to promote VIN stamping for existing converters, and it has a $7 million budget to carry it out. This requires record keeping, it prohibits the sale of partial converters, and strengthens criminal penalties. So we'll talk about some updates here as of March 2024. But again, this was introduced in January of 2023.
So this is the Senate bill, and the sponsor of the bill in the Senate is?
The senator is Amy Klobuchar, who introduced this bill.
Right.
This is S-154, and it currently has 7 co-sponsors. There's Senator Mike Braun, there's Senator Ron Wyden, Senator J.D. Vance, Senator Jeff Merkley, Senator Eric Schmidt, Senator Ben Ray Lujan, and Senator Shelley Moore Capito.
So it appears from what I'm seeing across the table, because I see your list,
right,
that it's bipartisan support.
Actually, it is, which is nice to have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party working together on this bill. So this is referred to the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. There's no member action at the committee. The staff's working to develop a consensus. And like we just said, there is people on both sides of the aisle that are actually working together promoting this bill that Senator Amy Klobuchar has presented to the Senate.
Yeah, right. So that's the Senate version.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at H.R. 621, which is the House version. And that version was introduced by Congressman Jim Baird. And I'm not going to name the list of co-sponsors because there's over 70 co-sponsors in the House. But as I peruse the list, I see it also has bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, all the way down the list. Well, that's encouraging to see that. So the House bill has been referred to 3 committees: Energy and Commerce, Judiciary, and Transportation and Infrastructure. At this point, there's no committee action yet. It's early in the game, right? Was just recently introduced. So what's occurred in the House, this is Baird's effort on, what was it, May 17th last year, there was a floor speech during National Police Week discussing this upcoming bill at that time. He stressed the support that he's received from the local law enforcement community, which is very important. And then in September, the 19th, there was testimony before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Senator Baird also attended the IPMI DC meeting. Members of our effort here, our committee here at the International Precious Metals Institute, were representing in DC on January 30th. So he attended that and stressed the need to get the PART Act done, of course, right?
Yeah.
And his willingness to work with the stakeholders to get a consensus on that.
Okay, a little update on my side here. There was a letter supporting the PART Act dated May 25th, 2023.
That's in the Senate.
This is on the Senate, so this is the federal side.
Right.
The letter was sent to chairs and ranking members of the Senate and House committees. Leadership of the House Judiciary and Transportation Committees were also copied. The signers writing in strong support of the Preventing Auto Recycling Theft, which is the PART Act here. It's HR 621. That's what you were discussing. That's the House bill.
Right.
And then the S-154 is the federal side. It was discussed the need for federal legislation since stolen converters are trafficked in between state lines. Obviously, it's a nationwide issue with converter theft. And they were also focusing on the VIN marking section of the legislation.
So our organization, the IPMI, in 2023 has activities on the calendar that took place. There were principles that were developed on suggesting ways to strengthen this bill. So there was input made on the bill, drafted an amended version of the PART Act incorporating these changes. So that was also important. Met with the Senate and House offices. So there were several visits up to D.C. by IPMI members in support of this. And they also met with the Senate Commerce Committee staff and Congressman Baird's staff at that time, as well as other stakeholders were present and suggested improvements to the bill. So that would have been in 23 IPMI activities. In early this year, 24, IPMI had a few activities. Again, Congressman Baird attended that IPMI meeting, and the delegation of stakeholders, they did congressional meetings. The staff of the Senate Commerce Committee, staff Congresswoman Betty McCollum, ranking House Democrat on the bill, and the staff of Senator Braun, ranking Senate Republican on the bill. So there's been a little bit of action taking place. We're not expecting a lot to occur this year because there's other issues that are before Congress and the Senate that they're working on, and at least we've got the start of it.
Right.
Do I personally expect this to, come to fruition in 24? Not really. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you on that. As we've heard, being members of the IPMI, and we're part of the committee there that's backing these bills. There are some other larger issues that they're working on, but I agree with you. It's a start. It's something that needs to be done. It's being reviewed. So the good news is that something's going to be happening as far as protecting, the owners of the vehicles, getting their converters stolen.
Right.
It's protecting them. Obviously, it's protecting, the insurance companies that are insuring those vehicles, because
You have a big long list in front of you. What
Yeah,
do
I'm
you have?
not going to read them all. But
These are letters of support from organizations across the country.
Multiple. I mean, it
Maybe
includes.
pick a few highlights out of that.
We got auto insurance, law enforcement, and other stakeholders signing. This was in May of 2023. This letter that was signed and sent in. National Automobile Dealers Association, American Car Rental Association, American Property Casualty Insurance Association, American Rental Association, American Truck Dealers. We got the National Consumers League, National Auto Auction Association. We got NTEA, which is the Association for the Work Truck Industry. So a lot of associations, including the National Association of EMTs, that signed this letter, and they want to see something done to prevent the theft of the catalytic converters, because it does affect multiple, companies, institutions,
Insurance companies.
Insurance companies. We've touched on that in past podcasts.
Consumers.
The amount of money, it affects the consumer, because, when they're filing these claims,
their
rates go up.
At the beginning, you mentioned some of the highlights that are in the bill. Can you just, mention one or two of those so we can talk about that briefly?
Sure. Some of the bullet points requires record keeping.
Oh, okay. Requires record keeping?
Yes.
Well, Business and Professions Code already requires record keeping. So
Correct.
All right, that's interesting. Go ahead.
This one says, obviously strengthens criminal penalties. So everybody's for that in our industry.
Sure.
Prohibits the sale of partial converters. I think that was maybe the decan substrate, for people that are processing and shipping that material to the smelters for final processing, then to the refiner.
And I think there's a little bit of an education process involved with the handling of end-of-life recycling substrate from the inside of a catalytic converter.
Right.
That language will probably evolve, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's some updates in here that we'll touch on.
You said something about VIN numbers, right?
Yeah. They were talking about this would create a grant program to promote VIN stamping for existing converters.
Okay. And how much money was proposed?
They allocated $7 million to carry that out.
Well, $7 million across all 50 states is probably going to cover 2 states. So I'm sure that's going to evolve as well.
Yeah.
But the practicality of VIN number stamping is another matter. It's quite a task when you consider how many cars are on the road in the United States.
Right.
That may not be adequate. It may not survive the final bill.
Right.
So
this was just their proposal.
This was a proposal. Get it started. Get the input from all of the stakeholders. Right.
That's right.
And then get this bill into a form that is workable. One caveat that I'd like to mention is if we do see federal legislation in this area, just remember, folks, the states can come along and increase a federal requirement. So at the very least, if a state doesn't have any regulation in this area, then they would look to the federal regs. So that would be a good starting point.
Mm-hmm. And we see that here a lot in California.
Right. Well, California, you want to talk about California, if they see something like this, they're probably going to want to wrap a program around it, create a license fee, a bureaucracy, and a revenue stream. But that's, California.
Right.
Other states, not so much.
Yeah, not so much.
Well, that was good. I really appreciate that update. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And one last thing here, it's another little update here. It says eliminates the prohibition on the sale of partial converters. So that is an update, and it also eliminates cash transactions. Staff of Senate Commerce Committee working to get consensus bill, and all congressional offices are continuing to work on this together. Like we've mentioned, you have both political parties coming together to work on this. Like you said, we're still we're not there. It's not finalized yet, so there's going to be some changes.
A lot of changes.
There's going to be some pushback on certain things. Obviously, we understand that.
And we'll get a good idea about timeline and how it's progressing here in the next 6 to 9 months, I would imagine.
Yeah.
By the end of the year. That issue of no cash transactions, I think we're going to talk about that in another video.
Good.